Everyone abandoned her when she got pregnant, but she raised a boy who made her proud forever. The air was thick with tension as the pregnancy test revealed 2 pink lines. At just 22, she stared at it in disbelief, her hands trembling. A waitress at a small-town diner with dreams of becoming a nurse, her life was about to change forever. Welcome back and enjoy the story. Urisa Morris clutched the plastic stick in her trembling hands, the small bathroom of her apartment suddenly feeling even more cramped than usual. The flickering fluorescent light cast harsh shadows across her face as she sank down onto the closed toilet lid, her knees too weak to hold her up any longer. 2 pink lines. There was no mistaking what they meant. At 22, with barely enough money to cover her rent and tuition for night classes, Urisa was pregnant. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her voice bouncing off the peeling wallpaper, but it was happening. And deep down, beneath the initial shock and fear, there was a small, quiet feeling that she couldn't quite name yet. Outside her bathroom window, Milwaukee's early spring rain pattered against the glass. The city had always felt like a temporary stop on the way to something better, a place where she could save enough money working at Rosie's diner before moving on to complete her nursing degree. Now, her carefully plotted course had veered sharply into unknown territory. Her boyfriend, Weil, would be home from his construction job soon. 3 years together, and they'd never seriously discussed children. They'd been careful, or so she thought. Her hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach. A life was growing there. Her child. Their child. The sound of the front door opening jerked her from her thoughts. She quickly wrapped the test in toilet paper and buried it in the trash can. Not yet. She needed time to process this herself before sharing the news. "Tess, you home?" Weil's voice called out. Using the nickname he'd given her during their first date, she splashed cold water on her face and took a deep breath. "Coming," she called back, forcing a cheerfulness she didn't feel into her voice. For the next 3 days, Urisa carried her secret like a physical weight, feeling it press against her chest each time Weil smiled at her across their small kitchen table. She watched him carefully, how he complained about his supervisor's unreasonable demands, how he talked about wanting to save enough to buy a motorcycle, how he changed the channel whenever a diaper commercial came on TV. All signs pointed to a man who wasn't ready for fatherhood. But on the 4th day, as they sat eating take-out Chinese food on their second-hand couch, Urisa couldn't hold it in any longer. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words tumbling out between bites of lo mein. Weil's plastic fork froze halfway to his mouth. "You're what?" "Pregnant. About 6 weeks, I think." The silence that followed seemed to stretch into eternity. Urisa watched as emotions flashed across Weil's face. Shock, confusion, fear, and something that looked disturbingly like resentment. "Say something," she finally pleaded. He set his container down on the coffee table, no longer interested in eating. "What do you want me to say, Tess? That I'm ready to be a father? That this is great timing?" His voice had taken on an edge she rarely heard. "I'm not asking you to be thrilled," she countered, her own voice rising slightly, "but this is happening to both of us." Weil stood up abruptly, running his hands through his dark hair. "I need to think," he muttered, grabbing his jacket from the hook by the door. "Where are you going?" Urisa asked, panic rising in her throat. "Out, I just need some air." The door closed behind him with a finality that sent a chill through her body. Weil didn't come home that night, or the next. On the 3rd morning, Urisa found a note propped against the coffee maker. "I'm sorry, Tess. I'm not ready for this. I never wanted to be a father, and I can't pretend that I do. I've taken a job in Detroit. Please don't try to find me. W." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could have. 3 years together, and he'd vanished without even saying goodbye to her face. Urisa called in sick to work that day, something she never did, and spent hours curled on their bed, now just her bed, alternating between tears of rage and despair. By evening, practical concerns began to intrude on her grief. Rent was due in 2 weeks. The apartment lease was in both their names, but the landlord, Mr. Harmon, was her father's longtime friend. She would need to talk to him about changing the arrangement, and soon. But first, she needed to tell her parents. The thought made her stomach clench with anxiety, but she needed support now more than ever. Sunday dinner at the Morris household was a tradition she rarely missed, and tomorrow would be as good a time as any to share her news. The following evening, Urisa sat at her parents' polished oak dining table, pushing roast beef around her plate, while her younger sister, Wamala, chatted excitedly about her college applications. Their mother, Eleanor, nodded approvingly as Wamala listed her top choices, all prestigious universities with strong pre-law programs. Their father, Richard, a deacon at the largest Baptist church in town, occasionally interjected with questions about scholarship opportunities. "What about you, Urisa?" Eleanor asked during a lull in the conversation. "How are your classes going?" Urisa set down her fork, her food barely touched. "Actually, I have something I need to tell you all." The sudden seriousness in her tone caused her father to look up sharply from his meal. "What is it, dear?" "I'm pregnant," she said, forcing herself to meet their eyes. "Almost 7 weeks now." The silence that fell over the dining room was deafening. Her mother's hand froze with a glass of water halfway to her lips. Her father's face darkened ominously. Only Wamela seemed uncertain how to react, her eyes darting between her parents and her sister. "Where is Weil?" Richard finally asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "He left," Urisa admitted, hating how small her voice sounded. "He's gone to Detroit." "So he abandoned you," her father stated flatly, "and now you expect us to pick up the pieces of your irresponsible behavior." "Richard," her mother cautioned, but her tone held no real disagreement. "I don't expect anything," Urisa countered, feeling a flicker of defiance. "I'm just letting you know what's happening in my life." Her father set his napkin beside his plate with deliberate care. "Well, there's an obvious solution here. I assume you've considered it." It took a moment for Urisa to understand what he was suggesting. When she did, she felt her cheeks flush with anger. "If you're talking about terminating my pregnancy, no, I haven't considered it, and I won't." "Then I don't see what options you have," Eleanor cut in, her voice brittle. "You can barely support yourself. How will you manage with a child?" "I'll figure it out," Urisa insisted, though she had no idea how. "I'll work extra shifts, apply for assistance if I need to." Richard's fist came down on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. "No daughter of mine will be on welfare." "Then help me," Urisa pleaded, looking from one parent to the other. "Just until I get on my feet. I'm still going to finish my nursing program. I can do this, but I need your support right now." Her father stood, his chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. "We raised you with values, Urisa, with an understanding of right and wrong. If you choose to have this child out of wedlock, you do so without our blessing or our support." "You can't mean that," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Your options are clear," he continued coldly. "End this pregnancy and return to the path you were on, or leave this house and don't come back until you've come to your senses." Urisa looked to her mother, hoping for some sign of sympathy, but Eleanor's face was a mask of disapproval. Wamela stared down at her plate, unwilling to meet her sister's gaze. "I see," Urisa said quietly, rising from her chair. The child growing inside her suddenly felt like the only family she had left. "Then I guess this is goodbye." She walked out of her childhood home with her head held high, though tears streamed freely down her face once she was behind the wheel of her ancient Honda Civic, What she didn't know then was that her parents would take down every photograph of her that evening, as if trying to erase her existence from their carefully ordered lives. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. The rain was relentless the day Mr. Harmon delivered his verdict. Eureka stood on the sidewalk in front of her apartment building, water dripping from her hair, seeping through her thin jacket, as the landlord, a man who had once bounced her on his knee at church picnics, informed her that due to multiple violations of the lease agreement, she had 30 days to vacate the premises. "What violations?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the downpour. "I've never been late on rent." Mr. Harmon wouldn't meet her eyes. "There have been noise complaints," he muttered unconvincingly, "and you're not supposed to have overnight guests for extended periods." "Weil was on the lease," she protested, "and he's gone now." "I'm sorry, Eureka. It's a business decision." But they both knew it wasn't. It was her father's influence, his moral outrage extending to his social circle, turning them against her one by one. Later that evening, as she packed her meager belongings into cardboard boxes salvaged from behind the local grocery store, Eureka placed a protective hand over her stomach. "We might be alone now," she whispered to her unborn child, "but I will give you everything I never had." The words felt like a vow, sacred and binding. Even as her world collapsed around her, that promise became an anchor to which she could cling. With nowhere else to turn, Eureka approached Mabel Fontana, the elderly owner of Rosie's Diner, where she'd worked for the past 2 years. Mabel was a tough woman who ran her business with an iron fist, but there was kindness beneath her gruff exterior. Kindness Eureka desperately needed. "I need a place to stay," she admitted during a quiet moment between the breakfast and lunch rushes, "just until I can find something else." Mabel's piercing grey eyes took in Eureka's disheveled appearance, lingering momentarily on her midsection, though her pregnancy wasn't yet visible. "I heard about your situation," she said finally. "News travels fast in this town." Eureka's shoulders sagged. Of course it did. By now, everyone from the church congregation to the regular customers at the diner would know about her shame. To her surprise, Mabel's weathered hand reached across the counter to cover hers. "There's a storage room in the back. It's not much, but there's space for a cot. You can stay there on one condition." "Anything," Eureka said, hope flaring within her. "You finish those nursing classes. I won't have you throwing away your future because of one setback." That night, Eureka curled up on a narrow cot in the diner's back room, surrounded by shelves of canned goods and cleaning supplies. The space was cramped and smelled of bleach and coffee grounds, but it was shelter. She opened her laptop, the most expensive thing she owned, and logged into her online courses, determined to keep moving forward despite everything. For the next several months, Eureka developed a grueling routine. She worked the morning shift at the diner, attended classes in the afternoons when possible, studied in the evenings, and slept in the storage room at night. The bathroom sink became her place to wash both herself and her clothes. Her meals consisted of diner leftovers that Mabel pretended not to notice her taking. As her pregnancy progressed, Eureka faced a new challenge: the disapproving stares and whispered comments from regular customers. This small, conservative town had little sympathy for a young, unmarried pregnant woman. Some patrons would request a different server when seated in her section. Others would leave religious pamphlets instead of tips. "You shouldn't have to put up with that," Randy, another waitress, commented, after a particularly difficult customer had loudly questioned Eureka's life choices within earshot of the entire diner. Eureka merely shrugged, hiding how deeply the words had cut. "I need this job more than they need their opinions validated," but even Mabel's kindness had its limits. When Euresa's pregnancy became impossible to conceal, her hours were gradually reduced. "It's not personal," Mabel explained apologetically, "but some of the regulars have complained. It's bad for business." With her income dwindling and medical expenses mounting, she'd found a clinic that offered services on a sliding scale, but it still wasn't cheap. Euresa began cleaning houses on weekends. The work was physically demanding, especially as her pregnancy advanced, but it paid in cash and required no explanation of her circumstances. Not all her employers were kind. Some treated her as if her pregnancy was somehow contagious, or spoke to her as if her situation reflected some fundamental moral failing. One woman insisted that Euresa use separate cleaning supplies from those used in the rest of the house. "I'm pregnant, not diseased," Euresa had wanted to say, but she swallowed the words. She needed the money too badly to risk losing the job. Despite these hardships, Euresa managed to save a small amount from each paycheck, placing the bills in a mason jar labeled "Future" that she kept hidden beneath her cot. Some days, the jar felt like the only tangible evidence that there would be a tomorrow better than today. Her due date was calculated for late January, but Wisconsin winters were unpredictable, and the first major storm arrived in early December. Euresa watched through the diner windows as snow accumulated in drifts along the sidewalks, worried about how she would manage once the baby arrived. The storage room was no place for an infant. 2 weeks before Christmas, Euresa felt the first contractions while mopping the diner floor after closing. She paused, leaning against the handle, waiting for the sensation to pass. False alarm, she told herself. But an hour later, as she prepared for bed, her water broke in a sudden gush that soaked through her only pair of maternity jeans. "Mabel," she called out, panic rising in her throat. The older woman lived in an apartment above the diner and sometimes stayed late doing paperwork. No answer came. Euresa was alone, and the contractions were coming faster now. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called for a taxi, but the dispatcher informed her that due to the snowstorm, there would be at least a 2-hour wait. "I don't have 2 hours," she said, but the line had already gone dead. The hospital was just over 2 miles away. On a normal day, an easy walk. But tonight, with snow falling heavily and contractions coming every few minutes, it might as well have been 100 miles. Euresa bundled herself in every layer she could find and stepped out into the storm. The wind cut through her clothing like knives, and the snow was already ankle-deep. Each step was a struggle, and every few minutes she had to stop, leaning against whatever was nearest, a lamppost, a parked car, a shop window, as contractions ripped through her body. "Just a little further," she kept telling herself, and then to her baby, "We're almost there. Hold on." Nearly an hour later, soaked to the skin and half frozen, Euresa staggered through the emergency room doors of Milwaukee General Hospital. "My baby's coming," she managed to say before her knees buckled beneath her. The hospital staff reacted quickly, moving her to a delivery room where the harsh fluorescent lights made her squint after the darkness outside. A nurse removed her wet clothes and wrapped her in warm blankets while a doctor examined her. "You're fully dilated," the doctor announced. "This baby is coming now. Is there someone we should call? The father? Family?" Euresa shook her head, tears mingling with the melting snow on her cheeks. "There's no one," she whispered. The delivery was mercifully quick, but intensely painful. Euresa gripped the bed rails until her knuckles turned white, with no hand to hold, no voice offering encouragement. When her son finally entered the world, at 3:17 a.m. on December 16th, his strong, indignant cry echoed in a room empty of celebration. "You have a healthy baby boy," the nurse said, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Euresa's chest. "What's his name?" Euresa stared down at her son's tiny features, the button nose, the rosebud mouth, the wispy dark hair, and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Victor," she said softly, "his name is Victor Morris, because despite everything, despite all odds, they had survived. They had won this first crucial battle together." As Victor slept in the hospital bassinet beside her bed, Uresa faced a stark reality. She had nowhere to take him. The storage room at the diner was no place for a newborn, especially in the dead of winter. When the hospital social worker, Mrs. Lambert, came to her room the following day, Uresa broke down and confessed her situation. "I have nothing for him," she admitted through tears. "No crib, no diapers, nowhere to live. I've failed him already." To her surprise, Mrs. Lambert didn't offer judgment or platitudes. Instead, she pulled a chair close to the bed and said, "Let's figure this out together. What will happen to Uresa and baby Victor? Will they find a place to call home in the harsh winter, or will the system separate mother and child? The challenges are mounting, and Uresa's strength is being tested like never before. By the end of the day, Mrs. Lambert had connected Uresa with New Beginnings, a program that provided temporary housing for women and children in crisis. The apartment they offered was tiny, a studio with barely enough room for a bed and a crib, but it was clean, warm, and most importantly, theirs. "It's a 6-month placement," Mrs. Lambert explained as she helped Uresa navigate the paperwork. "After that, they expect you to transition to independent housing, but it gives you time to get on your feet." The day Uresa and Victor were discharged from the hospital, Mrs. Lambert drove them to their new temporary home. The apartment was in a rundown building on the city's north side, with walls so thin that every argument, every crying baby, every television blaring in neighboring units invaded their space. But there was a donated crib for Victor, a small dresser filled with second-hand baby clothes, and a kitchenette where Uresa could prepare simple meals. "It's perfect," she told Mrs. Lambert, and meant it. After months of sleeping on a cot in a storage room, this felt like luxury. The reality of caring for a newborn while trying to rebuild her life hit Uresa like a freight train. Victor was colicky, crying for hours each night despite her best efforts to comfort him. Sleep became a distant memory as she struggled to meet his needs while figuring out their future. New Beginnings required its residents to either work or attend school. With Mrs. Lambert's help, Uresa found a place for Victor at a subsidized daycare and secured a job as a home health aide through an agency that didn't ask too many questions about her background. The pay was minimal and the hours often unpredictable, but it allowed her to continue her online nursing courses in the evenings. Working as a home health aide deepened Uresa's resolve to become a nurse. She found fulfillment in helping elderly clients with their daily needs, administering medications, assisting with physical therapy exercises, providing companionship to those who were often as lonely as she was. But the work was physically and emotionally draining, and there were many nights when she collapsed into bed after putting Victor down, too exhausted even to look at her coursework. On those nights, guilt would gnaw at her. Was she shortchanging her son by pursuing her education? Should she focus solely on him during these precious early months? But then she would remember the promise she had made in the rain to give him everything she never had, and that included a mother who could provide a stable future. The environment at New Beginnings was both supportive and challenging. Most of the other women there had their own complicated stories, escaping domestic violence, overcoming addiction, aging out of foster care with nowhere to go. Some found solidarity in shared struggles, forming ad hoc childcare cooperatives or trading clothing and baby supplies. Others, wounded by their experiences, kept to themselves, eyeing everyone with suspicion. Uresa fell somewhere in between. She formed cautious friendships with a few other mothers, particularly Xenia, a former law student who had fled an abusive marriage with her toddler daughter. But she also maintained a certain reserve, protecting the fragile new life she was trying to build from potential complications. "You're different from most who come through here," Mrs. Oates, the program director, remarked during one of their required weekly check-ins. "You have a plan." "I have to," Eureka replied simply. "It's not just me anymore." As Victor's 6-month birthday approached, coinciding with the end of their placement at New Beginnings, Eureka faced another crossroads. She had saved diligently from her meager income, but Milwaukee's rental market was unforgiving, especially for a single mother with limited credit history. Every apartment within her budget was in neighborhoods she wouldn't feel safe raising Victor in, and those in better areas required deposits and income verifications she couldn't provide. "Maybe it's time to reach out to your family," Mrs. Lambert suggested during a visit. "Sometimes people surprise you. Sometimes they just need time." Eureka considered this as she rocked Victor to sleep that night. She had sent her parents a birth announcement with a photo of their grandson, but it had been returned unopened. Her sister had sent a single text when Victor was born: "Congratulations, he's beautiful." But nothing since. The rejection still stung, but Eureka had begun to develop a protective callus around that particular wound. "We don't need them," she whispered to her sleeping son. "We have each other." 2 weeks before their time at New Beginnings was to end, Eureka made a bold decision. Milwaukee held too many painful memories, too many closed doors. She applied for a transfer with the Home Health Agency to their branch in Chicago, a larger city where anonymity might offer a fresh start, where her past wouldn't define her future. To her surprise, the agency approved her request. "Your supervisors speak highly of your work ethic," the HR representative told her. "We need good people in our Chicago office." The move was a logistical challenge, packing their few belongings, finding affordable housing from a distance, arranging childcare in an unfamiliar city. But as their bus pulled into Chicago Station on a sweltering July morning, Victor babbling happily in his carrier, Eureka felt a surge of hope stronger than anything she'd experienced since seeing those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. Their new beginning had finally arrived. Chicago's vastness was both intimidating and liberating. No one here knew Eureka's story unless she chose to share it. No one looked at her with the judgment that had followed her through the streets of her hometown. Here, she was just another young mother trying to make ends meet in a city that neither noticed nor cared about her struggles. The apartment she had secured through a program for low-income healthcare workers was small but functional, located in a diverse neighborhood where families spoke a dozen different languages and minded their own business. The walls were thin, just like at New Beginnings, but Eureka had become adept at tuning out the sounds of other people's lives. She found a daycare for Victor that was slightly beyond her budget, but employed actual early childhood education specialists rather than merely providing supervision. The extra expense meant cutting corners elsewhere, buying second-hand clothes, clipping coupons religiously, walking instead of taking public transportation when weather permitted. But Eureka considered it an investment in her son's development. Her new position as a home health aide for the Chicago branch introduced her to Mrs. Chen, an elderly widow who lived in a small apartment filled with photographs of her children and grandchildren, all living too far away to visit regularly. Mrs. Chen took an immediate liking to Eureka, and upon learning that she was studying to become a nurse, often insisted that she bring her textbooks along and study while Mrs. Chen napped. "A mother needs education to provide for her child," Mrs. Chen would say in her accented English. "My mother could not read, and she suffered for it. You must learn everything you can." On days when Mrs. Chen was feeling particularly well, she would ask to see pictures of Victor and offer childcare advice that blended traditional Chinese practices with American pediatric recommendations. Though they came from vastly different backgrounds, Uresa found in Mrs. Chen the maternal guidance she had been denied from her own mother. One afternoon, as Uresa was helping Mrs. Chen sort her medications for the week, the older woman made an unexpected suggestion. "My son Michael works at Chicago Memorial Hospital. He is in administration. Perhaps he could help you find a better position while you finish your studies." Uresa was hesitant to accept such a personal favor, but Mrs. Chen was insistent. "You help me every day. Let me help you this once." 2 weeks later, Uresa found herself in the Human Resources Department of Chicago Memorial, interviewing for a position as a medical receptionist. The pay was substantially better than her home health aide work, and the hours were predictable. Weekdays from 8 to 4, allowing her to be home with Victor in the evenings and eliminating the need for expensive evening childcare. "Your experience in healthcare is limited," the interviewer noted, reviewing her application. "But Mrs. Chen's son speaks highly of your commitment and work ethic." "I'm a quick learner," Uresa assured her, "and I'm already halfway through my nursing program." To her delight, she was offered the position on the spot. As she called the daycare to inform them of her new schedule, Uresa felt as if another piece of her carefully constructed plan was falling into place. For the first time since leaving Milwaukee, financial stability seemed within reach. The medical office where Uresa worked was managed by Zarol Dixon, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who ran the front desk operations with military precision. Initially, Zarol's exacting standards and brusque manner intimidated Uresa, but she soon realized that beneath the tough exterior was a fair-minded supervisor who valued competence above all else. "You're picking this up faster than most," Zarol remarked, after Uresa successfully navigated a particularly complicated insurance verification process during her second week. "Keep it up." As the weeks passed, Uresa's confidence grew along with her proficiency. Her natural empathy made her skilled at dealing with anxious patients, and her ongoing nursing education gave her an edge in understanding medical terminology and procedures. Doctors began to request that she handle their patients specifically, appreciating her efficiency and calm demeanor. Victor was thriving as well. At 14 months, he was walking confidently, beginning to form words, and showing an infectious curiosity about everything around him. His daycare teachers reported that he was exceptionally social, often comforting other children who were upset or sharing his toys without prompting. "He's going to be a natural leader," his primary caregiver told Uresa during a parent-teacher conference. "You should be very proud." Proud didn't begin to cover what Uresa felt when she looked at her son. It was as if all the hardship she had endured had been distilled into this one perfect being, resilient, joyful, and utterly unaware that their life was in any way different from others. One evening, as Uresa was gathering her things to leave work, Zarol stopped by her desk with an unusual invitation. "My son's birthday party is this weekend. Nothing fancy, just a cookout in the park. You should bring Victor." Surprised but pleased, Uresa accepted. It would be their first social event since moving to Chicago, their first opportunity to interact with others outside of work and daycare. The party was small but lively, held in a neighborhood park where Zarol's 9-year-old son and his friends chased each other across the playground, while adults chatted around picnic tables laden with food. Victor was immediately enchanted by the older children, toddling after them with delighted squeals. As Uresa watched him play, Zarol sat down beside her with 2 plates of barbecue. "He's a great kid," she observed, nodding toward Victor. "You've done well with him." "Thank you," Uresa replied, accepting the plate gratefully. "Sometimes I worry that I'm not doing enough, that he's missing out because it's just the 2 of us." Zarol's laugh was warm and genuine. "Listen, I've been a single mom for 7 years now. Trust me when I tell you that quality matters more than quantity when it comes to parents. One good parent who's really present beats two who aren't any day of the week. The simple validation from someone who understood her situation loosened something tight in Euresa's chest. She had been so focused on providing for Victor's physical needs that she had given little thought to building a community for them both. "Does it get easier?" she found herself asking. Zarol considered the question seriously. Different challenges come with different stages, but you get stronger, more confident, and eventually you stop seeing yourself as less than because you're doing it alone. By the time they left the party, Victor had made friends with Zarol's son, who had patiently shown the toddler how to throw a frisbee, and Euresa had exchanged phone numbers with two other mothers, one a nurse and the other a medical billing specialist, who offered to help her navigate the healthcare system's bureaucracy for continuing education. On the bus ride home, Victor fell asleep against her shoulder, his cheeks flushed from sun and excitement. Euresa realized that they were evolving from survivors into livers, people who didn't just endure each day but found joy in it. The friendship that developed between Euresa and Zarol became a lifeline for both women. As a single mother several years ahead on the journey, Zarol offered practical advice and occasional emergency childcare when Victor was sick or Euresa needed to attend an evening class that couldn't be taken online. In return, Euresa helped Zarol with her son's homework, particularly science projects which had never been Zarol's strong suit, and provided companionship during the holidays, which could be especially lonely for single-parent families. "We're creating our own traditions," Zarol declared during Victor's second Christmas, as the two women watched their sons decorate a small artificial tree in Euresa's apartment. "Family isn't always about who shares your DNA." The truth of that statement resonated deeply with Euresa, who had not heard from her parents since leaving Milwaukee. Her sister Wamela occasionally sent text messages, brief updates about her law school progress or impersonal birthday wishes for Victor, but never returned Euresa's calls. The Morris family had effectively excised her from their lives, treating her continued independence as an ongoing affront to their values rather than the triumph of resilience it truly was. Have you ever known someone who had to rebuild their life completely on their own, like Euresa? Share your thoughts in the comments. As Victor's third birthday approached, Euresa received unexpected news. Her application for a nursing scholarship through Chicago Memorial's Employee Development Program had been accepted. The scholarship would cover her remaining tuition and provide a stipend for textbooks, allowing her to complete her degree without accruing further debt. "They only award 3 of these each year," Zarol told her, having served on the selection committee. "Your application was the strongest by far. The essay you wrote about healthcare disparities for single mothers was compelling." The scholarship was a game changer, but it also meant greater demands on Euresa's already limited time. While she could continue working reduced hours at the reception desk, her clinical rotations would require early mornings and occasional weekends, times when she was usually with Victor. "I'll help," Zarol assured her. "So will the other mums. From our building, we'll create a schedule. Victor can stay with us when you need to be at the hospital. It's not forever, and what you're doing will benefit both of you in the long run." Euresa accepted the help with grace, having learned that independence didn't mean isolation. "I'll find ways to make it up to you," she promised. "Just pass it forward someday," Zarol replied with a wink. "That's how we survive." Victor adapted to the new routine with remarkable flexibility, delighting in the variety of special days. With different caregivers, he thrived under the attention of Zarol's son, who had appointed himself Victor's unofficial big brother, teaching him everything from how to tie his shoes to the rules of basketball. Euresa's nursing program consumed every minute she wasn't working or with Victor. Clinical rotations were physically demanding, often requiring her to be on her feet for 12 hours straight. Evening study sessions regularly extended past midnight, leaving her with barely enough sleep before starting the next day's obligations. There were moments, usually around 3 a.m., when she was struggling to memorize medication dosages or procedure protocols, when doubt would creep in. Was she pushing herself too hard? Would Victor resent these years when her attention was divided? But whenever such thoughts threatened to overwhelm her, Urissa would remember the alternative, remaining stuck in a low-wage cycle that offered no security for either of them. The nursing program revealed Urissa's natural aptitude for patient care. Her clinical supervisors consistently praised her ability to remain calm under pressure and her intuitive understanding of patients' needs beyond their stated complaints. "You have a gift," Dr. Nowak, her pediatric rotation supervisor, told her after witnessing Urissa soothe an inconsolable child during a particularly difficult procedure. "Some aspects of nursing can be taught, but what you have is innate." Such validation sustained her through the grueling schedule and occasional setbacks. When Victor developed an ear infection during her final exams, forcing her to study in the pediatric waiting room while he dozed fitfully against her shoulder, Urissa reminded herself that each challenge was temporary, but the benefits of her education would be permanent. By Victor's 4th birthday, Urissa had completed all her coursework and clinical requirements. The graduation ceremony coincided with his birthday celebration, a deliberate choice that symbolized how intertwined their journeys had become. As she accepted her nursing degree, wearing the traditional white uniform and cap, Urissa spotted Victor in the audience sitting on Zarul's lap, waving a small American flag someone had given him. "That's my mommy," he announced proudly to everyone nearby, his voice carrying in the momentary silence between names being called. Several people chuckled, but Urissa felt tears spring to her eyes. Even at 4, Victor understood that this accomplishment belonged to both of them. The celebration afterward was modest, a small gathering at a local pizza place with Zarul and her son, Mrs. Chen, now retired but still a cherished friend, and a few classmates who had formed a study group with Urissa. During their final semester, someone had brought a cake with both "Congratulations, Graduate" and "Happy Birthday, Victor" written in blue icing. As Victor blew out his candles, Dr. Nowak unexpectedly appeared at their table. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, placing a wrapped package in front of Victor and a manila envelope beside Urissa's plate. "I wanted to drop these off personally." Victor was immediately distracted by the present, a child's doctor kit, complete with a real stethoscope for little ears only, as Dr. Nowak explained. But Urissa was more interested in the envelope. Inside was a formal job offer from Chicago, Memorial's pediatric ward, with a starting salary nearly triple what she had been making as a receptionist. "We need nurses like you," Dr. Nowak said simply. "Someone who understands what our patients' families are going through because she's walked in their shoes." That night, after tucking an exhausted Victor into bed with his new stethoscope clutched in his small hand, Urissa allowed herself a moment of pure, unadulterated pride. The journey from that rainy day in Milwaukee to this moment had been arduous, but they had made it. She had kept her promise to give Victor everything she never had, including a mother who could provide security and opportunity. The transition from student to professional nurse came with its own learning curve. Urissa's first weeks in the pediatric ward were physically and emotionally demanding. The 12-hour shifts left her exhausted, and the responsibility of caring for critically ill children weighed heavily on her conscience. There were nights when she came home so drained that she could barely find the energy to eat dinner before collapsing into bed. But there were also profound rewards. The gratitude in parents' eyes when she took extra time to explain a procedure, the trust of children who stopped crying when she entered their rooms, the respect of doctors who valued her observations. These moments confirmed that she had found her calling. The increased income allowed Uresa to move to a slightly larger apartment in a safer neighborhood with better schools. It wasn't luxurious by any standard, a modest two-bedroom unit in a well-maintained building, but it represented a significant step up from their previous accommodations. For the first time, Victor had his own bedroom, which he delighted in decorating with dinosaur posters and bookshelves filled with library books. "Is this our forever home?" he asked, as they unpacked. His clothes into a second-hand dresser Zarel had helped them refinish. Uresa considered the question carefully. "For now," she answered honestly, "but someday we might have a house with a yard where you can play." Victor seemed satisfied with this answer, already more focused on arranging his toy cars in perfect rows along his windowsill than on future possibilities. With their basic needs securely met, Uresa began to look beyond mere survival toward providing Victor with opportunities she had been denied in her own childhood. She enrolled him in a community soccer league, found an affordable piano teacher who offered lessons at the local church, and made sure their weekends included regular visits to Chicago's museums and cultural attractions. "You're giving that boy the world," Zarel observed one evening, as they watched Victor practice his piano scales with intense concentration. "He's going to grow up knowing he can do anything." "That's the plan," Uresa replied, though she sometimes worried that she was overcompensating for Victor's lack of extended family with too many activities. "I just don't want him to feel like he's missing anything." Zarel's expression grew serious. "The only thing kids really need is to feel secure and loved. Everything else is just decoration." As Victor began elementary school, Uresa encountered a new challenge she hadn't anticipated: the complex social dynamics of parent groups. At school functions and birthday parties, she found herself an outsider among couples who exchanged knowing glances about shared parenting burdens, or made casual references to family vacations she could never afford. Some mothers were openly welcoming, incorporating her into conversations and ensuring Victor was included in playdates and activities. Others maintained a polite but unmistakable distance, as if her single mother status might somehow contaminate their conventional family structures. "Don't let it bother you," advised Ms. Patterson, Victor's first-grade teacher, after noticing Uresa's isolation during a parent-teacher night. "Some people are uncomfortable with any family that looks different from what they consider normal. But Victor is thriving. He's academically gifted, emotionally intelligent, and one of the most well-liked children in the class. Whatever you're doing, it's working." These words became a mantra Uresa repeated to herself when doubt crept in. When Victor asked why he didn't have a father like his friends, or when birthday party invitations mysteriously failed to materialize from certain classmates, or when room mothers forgot to contact her about volunteering opportunities. Rather than becoming bitter, Uresa channeled this exclusion into creating special experiences for Victor that other children might envy. Their weekends became adventures, homemade science experiments in the kitchen, elaborate fort-building competitions, cooking lessons where Victor learned family recipes that connected him to his heritage. She taught him to play chess, introduced him to classic films, and read to him from books well beyond his grade level, nurturing his natural intelligence and curiosity. What will happen as Victor grows older? Will Uresa's sacrifices be recognized, or will new challenges arise to test their resilience? The story continues to unfold with unexpected developments ahead. On a crisp autumn morning during Victor's fifth-grade year, Uresa received a phone call that changed everything once again. The hospital's human resources director requested an immediate meeting, offering no explanation over the phone. Heart pounding with anxiety, Uresa arranged for coverage of her patients and made her way to the administrative wing. "We're creating a new position," the director explained once Eureka was seated across from her desk. Patient care coordinator for pediatric services. The role would involve less direct patient care and more administrative responsibility, developing care plans, training new staff, liaising between departments. It comes with a significant salary increase and regular hours, Monday through Friday. Eureka tried to process this unexpected opportunity. Why me? I've only been a registered nurse for a few years. Surely there are more experienced candidates. Experience isn't everything, the director replied. You have exceptional organizational skills. You communicate effectively with both families and medical staff, and you understand our systems from multiple perspectives given your previous receptionist role. Dr. Nowak has been particularly vocal about your qualifications. The position would mean no more night shifts, no more missed school events, and financial security beyond anything Eureka had imagined possible when she first held that positive pregnancy test. It would also mean less time at patients' bedsides, the aspect of nursing she found most fulfilling. I'd like to think about it, she said carefully. This would be a significant change. That evening she discussed the opportunity with Victor, over dinner, explaining both the benefits and drawbacks as honestly as she could. At 10 years old, he had developed a maturity beyond his years, a consequence of being raised by a mother who had always treated him as a partner in their shared journey rather than merely a child to be directed. "You should take it, Mom," he said with conviction after considering her explanation. "You're always tired after night shifts, and this way you could come to my science fair next month." His simple reasoning clarified everything. Eureka accepted the position the following day. The transition to her new role coincided with Victor's graduation from elementary school. As she watched him accept a special award for academic excellence, Eureka felt a profound sense of validation. Despite every obstacle, despite starting with nothing but determination and love, they had built a life that now included not just stability, but genuine achievement. The patient care coordinator position revealed yet another of Eureka's hidden talents: leadership. Her ability to streamline processes, mediate conflicts between departments, and implement evidence-based practices quickly earned her the respect of both medical staff and hospital administration. For the first time in her career, Eureka found herself invited to conferences as a presenter, sharing the innovations she had developed to improve patient outcomes. Their improved financial situation allowed for small luxuries that had once seemed impossible: brand new school clothes instead of second-hand, occasional dinners at restaurants where tablecloths and cloth napkins were standard, and finally, a used but reliable car that eliminated their dependence on Chicago's public transportation system. "We're middle class now," Victor observed one day as they drove home from his piano recital, the comment so unexpected that Eureka nearly missed a stop sign. "What makes you say that?" she asked, curious about his perception. He shrugged, his gangly preteen frame already hinting at the man he would become. "We have a car. I take piano lessons. You wear nice clothes to work. That's what middle class means, right?" Eureka smiled, remembering her own childhood understanding of social class, how she had envied classmates with new bicycles and vacation stories, unaware of the complex economic factors that separated her family from theirs. "It's more complicated than that, but yes, I suppose we are middle class now. Does that matter to you?" Victor considered the question seriously. "Not really, but I like that you don't have to work so hard anymore. You seem happier." His perception was accurate. The constant stress of financial instability had lifted, allowing Eureka to be more present, not just physically but emotionally. The anger she had carried toward Weil, toward her parents, toward a society that had judged rather than supported her, had gradually diminished, replaced by a quiet confidence in her own resilience. This newfound equilibrium was tested when Victor entered 7th grade and developed a persistent cough that wouldn't respond to normal treatment. Initial diagnoses suggested seasonal allergies or a minor respiratory infection. But when the symptoms persisted for months, more extensive testing revealed a rare form of juvenile asthma, complicated by an unusual structural abnormality in his lungs. He'll need specialized medication and potentially surgery if his condition worsens, the pulmonologist explained, during a consultation that left Uresa feeling as if she had been plunged back into the uncertainty of those early days after Victor's birth. Your insurance will cover some of it, but the newest treatments aren't fully approved yet, which means significant out-of-pocket costs. Just when stability had seemed within reach, this new challenge threatened to undermine everything she had built. The specialized medications cost nearly as much as their monthly rent, and even with her improved salary, the financial strain was substantial. Determined that Victor would receive the best possible care regardless of cost, Uresa took on weekend shifts at a nearby urgent care facility to supplement her income. The additional work meant less time with Victor during a period when he needed extra support, adjusting to both his health condition and the social complexities of middle school. There were evenings when Uresa would return home to find him already asleep, his completed homework neatly stacked on the kitchen table, along with a note about his day. "You don't have to work so much," he told her one Sunday morning as she prepared to leave for her urgent care shift. "I'm okay with the regular medicine. The special stuff isn't that much better." The fact that he had noticed her financial calculations, that he was willing to sacrifice his own health to ease her burden, broke Uresa's heart. "Zatis, your health is not negotiable," she told him firmly. "We've faced worse than this, and we'll get through it together, just like always." Victor's medical challenges coincided with an unexpected opportunity. During a training session on electronic medical records, Uresa demonstrated such proficiency with the complex software that the IT director suggested she consider applying for a hospital management position that had just opened, a role that required both healthcare experience and administrative skills. "The medical administration certificate you earned last year makes you qualified," he pointed out, "and the position comes with executive-level benefits, including a much more comprehensive health insurance plan." The timing seemed almost miraculous, but Uresa hesitated. The role would mean leaving direct patient care entirely, moving into the realm of spreadsheets and budgets, rather than the human connections that had drawn her to nursing. Yet the improved benefits would make Victor's treatments fully covered, eliminating the need for her weekend work. After several sleepless nights weighing her options, Uresa applied for the position. The interview process was rigorous, involving multiple rounds, with various hospital executives and a presentation on healthcare efficiency strategies. When the offer came, with a salary nearly double her current earnings and benefits that would cover all of Victor's medical needs, she accepted with mixed emotions. "You're not betraying your calling," Zarol assured her when Uresa confessed her conflict about leaving nursing. "You're using different skills to serve the same mission, helping patients get the care they need. Besides, Victor needs you more than your patients do right now." The transition to hospital management brought a steep learning curve, but Uresa discovered that her years of navigating complex systems as a single mother had prepared her well for corporate politics and departmental negotiations. Her background in direct patient care gave her credibility with the medical staff, while her administrative experience helped her communicate effectively with the business operations team. Victor's condition stabilized under the new treatment regimen, his breathing improving enough that he was able to join the school's debate team, an activity that perfectly suited his quick mind and growing interest in social justice issues. At their annual checkup with the pulmonologist, they received the best possible news. Surgery would not be necessary if he continued to respond well to the medication. "We got lucky," the doctor admitted. His body is responding better than expected. He's a fighter. Urisa smiled at the familiar characterization. He comes by it honestly. As Victor entered high school, their life settled into a comfortable routine. Urisa's management position provided not just financial security, but scheduling flexibility that allowed her to attend his debate competitions and academic awards ceremonies. For the first time since his birth, she found herself with enough mental and emotional bandwidth to consider her own interests beyond motherhood and career. She joined a book club, took a weekend painting class, and even went on a few cautious dates arranged by well-meaning colleagues, though none developed into meaningful relationships. After so many years of single-minded focus on survival and advancement, learning to incorporate personal fulfillment felt like discovering a new country without a map. "You should get out more," Victor encouraged her one evening after she declined yet another dinner invitation from a doctor in the cardiology department. "I'm old enough to stay home alone, you know. I promise not to throw any wild parties." His attempt at humor highlighted a truth Urisa had been avoiding. Her son was growing up, developing an identity separate from their shared struggle. Soon, he would be making college plans, leaving home to build his own life. The thought filled her with both pride and a peculiar sense of loss. What she didn't expect was how Victor's emerging independence would coincide with an unwelcome blast from the past. Shortly after his 16th birthday, as he began researching colleges that offered strong pre-medical programs, Urisa received a card in the mail with a Milwaukee postmark. Inside was a brief note from her mother, Eleanor. "We've been following your career through mutual acquaintances. Your father and I would like to reconnect. We're not getting any younger, and we'd like to know our grandson before it's too late. Please call if you're willing to speak with us." The card included a phone number, but no apology for 16 years of silence, no acknowledgement of the pain they had caused or the milestones they had missed. Urisa's first instinct was to tear it up and pretend it had never arrived. But maturity and time had softened some of her anger, replacing it with a complex melange of emotions she couldn't easily categorize. After several days of internal debate, she showed the card to Victor, explaining as neutrally as possible the circumstances of their estrangement from her family. He had known the broad outlines of their story, that his grandparents had disapproved of Urisa's pregnancy, and that his father had abandoned them. But she had spared him the more painful details of her parents' ultimatum and their subsequent erasure of her from family history. "They're my grandparents," he said after considering the card carefully. "I'd like to meet them at least once, but only if you're okay with it." His maturity in the face of such a complicated situation reminded Urisa yet again that she had succeeded in her most important goal, raising a son who was both compassionate and self-assured, capable of making difficult decisions with both heart and head. "I'll call them," she decided, "but we'll take this slowly on our terms, and at the first sign that they might hurt you the way they hurt me, it ends." The initial phone conversation with her mother was stilted, filled with awkward pauses and carefully neutral topics. Eleanor spoke of the church's new building project and Richard's recent retirement from the deacon board. Urisa shared sanitized versions of her career progression and Victor's academic achievements. Neither mentioned the years of silence or the circumstances of their estrangement. After several such calls, they arranged a meeting at a restaurant, halfway between Chicago and Milwaukee, neutral territory where either party could retreat if needed. Urisa spent hours preparing Victor for the encounter, warning him that his grandparents might have expectations or make comments that reflected their conservative worldview. "Just be yourself," she told him the morning of the meeting. "If they can't appreciate who you are, who we are, then that's their loss, not ours." The reunion was neither the warm reconciliation Eleanor might have hoped for, nor the disaster Euarissa had feared. Richard remained formal, asking polite questions about Victor's education and interests, but maintaining an emotional distance that suggested he was there out of duty rather than genuine desire for connection. Eleanor was more engaged, clearly, enchanted by her grandson's articulate responses and impressive academic record, though she occasionally looked at Euarissa with an expression that hovered between admiration and discomfort. "You've done well for yourself," Richard said as they prepared to leave, the statement landing somewhere between acknowledgement and surprise. "Victor is a credit to you." "Thank you," Euarissa replied simply, choosing not to point out that such success had come without their support or blessing. As they drove back to Chicago, Victor was uncharacteristically quiet, processing the experience of meeting the grandparents who had rejected his existence before his birth. "They're not what I expected," he finally said, as the city skyline came into view. "Grandma seems nice, but sad somehow. Grandpa is formal." "That's a diplomatic way of putting it," Euarissa replied with a small smile. "What did you think of them overall?" Victor considered the question seriously. "I'm glad I met them because they're part of our history. But they're not really family, are they? Not like Zarol and Terence or Mrs. Chen. They're just relatives." His insight struck Euarissa with the force of revelation. Over the years, she had constructed a chosen family that provided more genuine support and connection than her biological relatives ever had. The distinction Victor made between family and mere relatives perfectly articulated what she had intuitively understood but never verbalized. "That's exactly right," she agreed. "Family is defined by love and presence, not just DNA." In the months that followed, Euarissa established limited contact with her parents, occasional phone calls, a few more in-person meetings when their schedules aligned. Their relationship remained cordial, but constrained, the weight of past betrayal neither addressed nor resolved. She accepted their tentative overtures while maintaining firm boundaries that protected both her and Victor from potential disappointment. Victor maintained a similar approach, politely accepting birthday cards and graduation gifts from his grandparents, while investing his emotional energy in relationships that offered more authentic connection. His focus remained firmly on the future, specifically on his applications to prestigious universities with strong pre-medical programs. During the summer before his senior year, Victor secured an internship at Chicago Memorial through Euarissa's professional connections. Working in the hospital's research department, he assisted with a study on pediatric respiratory conditions, a topic of personal significance given his own health history. His supervisor, Dr. Javier Mendez, took a special interest in mentoring him, recognizing both his intellectual aptitude and his unusual maturity. "Your son has a natural gift for medicine," Dr. Mendez told Euarissa during a chance encounter in the hospital cafeteria. "He asks the kind of questions that show he's thinking about patients as whole people, not just interesting cases. That's something many medical students never develop." This professional validation of Victor's interests strengthened his resolve to pursue medicine, despite Euarissa's occasional concerns about the length and cost of medical training. When he expressed interest in applying to Stanford's pre-medical program, one of the most competitive in the country, she swallowed her anxiety about the distance and expense and helped him prepare his application. "We'll figure out the financial, in part if you get accepted," she assured him, though she had no idea how they would manage the astronomical tuition even with scholarships. "Don't limit your dreams because of money. We've overcome bigger obstacles." As senior year progressed, Victor's accomplishments accumulated: perfect SAT scores, selection as debate team captain, publication of a research paper he had co-authored. with Dr. Mendez in a respected medical journal. With each achievement, Warisa felt a deepening certainty that all the sacrifices had been worthwhile. The lonely nights, the grueling work schedules, the years of financial austerity. Her son was becoming exactly the person she had hoped he would be. Intelligent, compassionate, and determined to make a meaningful contribution to the world. The college acceptance letters began arriving in early spring. Yale, Johns Hopkins, Northwestern, each with varying scholarship offers that still left significant financial gaps. Warisa researched loan options and calculated budget scenarios, determined that money would not stand between Victor and his chosen path, though the prospects of substantial debt weighed heavily on her mind. Then, on a rainy Tuesday that eerily echoed that long-ago day when her pregnancy test had shown 2 pink lines, the Stanford letter arrived. Not only had Victor been accepted to their prestigious pre-medical program, but he had also been awarded their most generous scholarship, a full tuition package awarded to only 5 incoming students each year, specifically those demonstrating exceptional promise in medicine combined with demonstrated financial need. As Victor read the letter aloud, his voice shaking with excitement, Warisa felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, a burden she had carried for so long that she had almost forgotten it existed. Her son would have opportunities she could never have imagined for herself. He would enter adulthood without the constraints of poverty or limited expectations that had shaped her own early years. What neither of them anticipated was that Stanford's scholarship announcement would coincide with the annual hospital fundraising gala, an event Warisa now attended in her management capacity but had once worked as a server during her early days in Chicago. Victor had been invited to attend as well, recognized for his contributions to Dr. Mendez's research team. During the gala's award ceremony, as various hospital staff and donors were recognized for their contributions, the event director unexpectedly called Victor to the stage. Before we conclude tonight's formalities, we have a special presentation. Victor Morris, one of our student researchers, has recently been accepted to Stanford University's pre-medical program on a full scholarship. We've asked him to say a few words about his journey and his future plans. Warisa watched with pride as her son, now taller than she was, his features a perfect blend of her determination and Wiles' charm, approached the podium with confidence. What she didn't expect was the direction his impromptu speech would take. "Thank you for this recognition," he began, his voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes focused on him. "But the person who really deserves to be standing here is my mother, Warisa Morris." A murmur ran through the crowd as Victor continued, his gaze finding hers in the audience. 18 years ago, my mother was abandoned by everyone who should have supported her when she chose to have me. She was 22, alone, and at one point homeless. But she made a promise to give me everything she never had, and she has kept that promise through sacrifices most of us can't imagine. As Victor recounted their journey, from the storage room at Rosie's Diner to her nursing school graduation, from his health challenges to this moment of triumph, Warisa saw faces in the audience transform from polite interest to genuine emotion. These colleagues who knew her only as a competent administrator were hearing for the first time the story that had shaped her into the woman she had become. "So while I'm honored by Stanford's recognition of my potential," Victor concluded, "I want everyone here to know that everything I am began with her courage. My mother taught me that family isn't who shares your blood, but who shares your heart. She showed me that the obstacles we face don't define us, how we overcome them does." The audience rose in a standing ovation that left Warisa breathless. As Victor returned to their table, accepting handshakes and congratulations along the way, she found herself surrounded by colleagues offering words of admiration she had never expected to hear. Among them was Dr. Elaine Kovac, the hospital's chief medical officer, a woman who had once denied Eureka a promotion, citing concerns about her family responsibilities as a single mother. "I clearly misjudged you years ago," Dr. Kovac acknowledged. Her normally austere expression softened by what appeared to be genuine regret. "We're creating a new position, Director of Patient Advocacy and Education. Given what I've just learned about your journey and your evident skills, I believe you would be perfect for the role. If you're interested, I'd like to discuss it with you next week." As the gala concluded and they made their way to the parking garage, Victor's excitement was palpable. "Did you hear what Dr. Kovac said? That would be another promotion. Are you going to take it?" Eureka smiled, emotion still tight in her throat from his unexpected tribute. "Let's talk about it tomorrow. Tonight belongs to your achievement, not mine." Udi, but as they drove home through Chicago's glittering nightscape, she found herself contemplating how far they had come from that rainy day in Milwaukee. From a pregnant waitress with nowhere to go to a respected healthcare administrator. From a terrified young woman giving birth alone to the mother of a Stanford pre-medical scholar. The road had been harder than anyone should have to travel, but they had not merely survived, they had flourished. The following week, as she helped Victor prepare for a pre-college summer program Stanford offered to scholarship recipients, Eureka found a handwritten letter tucked under her car's windshield wiper. The sight momentarily triggered memories of Wiles' abandonment note, but the handwriting was Victor's. Inside, he had written words that crystallized everything she had worked for, everything she had hoped to achieve as a mother. "Everything I am began with your courage. You taught me that family isn't who shares your blood, but who shares your heart. Thank you for showing me that the obstacles we face don't define us. How we overcome them does." As Eureka drives away from Stanford's campus after helping Victor move into his dormitory, watching his tall figure grow smaller in the rearview mirror, as he waves goodbye, she reflects on the journey from that rainy night with a single suitcase to this moment of triumph. The road ahead still holds challenges, but now for the first time, she allows herself to acknowledge a simple truth. They had not just survived, they had flourished. And in that flourishing, they had rewritten a story that began with abandonment into one of the most profound forms of love. Congratulations, type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.